Yeshua goes into the temple and he's challenged by temple authorities. By what authority do you do this? Who gave you this authority? And Yeshua answered and he said, I will ask you one question. If you answer, I will tell you. In other words, the answer that you give me will be your answer. That will be the answer. In all three synoptic gospels, Yeshua publicly endorsed Yochanan's washing to the leaders of Israel in the Jerusalem temple. The question he asked was Yochanan's baptisma from heaven or from men? Answer me. So, the leaders that confronted Yeshua were trying to discern in an antagonistic way. They didn't believe he was Messiah, but they were saying, who gave you the right to act like this? They were the leaders of Israel, and they could investigate and clarify and do whatever they needed to do to find out what's going on in the nation. And Yeshua was causing quite a stir. So they asked him, trying to find out what he was all about, what Yeshua was all about, what he would say about himself. So Yeshua says, okay, you have authority to ask questions about me. What are your findings about Yochanan's end-time washing? Was Yochanan's baptisma from heaven or from men? That's the question. Of course, we know the leaders of Israel didn't want to answer one way or the other, fearful of being stoned, and they didn't think that Yochanan was sent from the Almighty. So they didn't answer, and Yeshua said, I'm not answering either. But the thing is, folks, Yeshua didn't ask this question to get out of a tight spot. He was asking the leaders of Israel. He'd just ridden the donkey into Jerusalem as the king of Israel. So he literally considered himself the legitimate ruler of Israel. He's the king of Israel. He says, who do you people say that I am? More or less. This was just days before his crucifixion. Just days before his crucifixion, Yeshua said that Yochanan came in the way of righteousness. He said that right after he asked them about Yochanan's baptisma. Was Yochanan's baptisma from heaven or from men? So right after that, he said Yochanan came in the way of righteousness. The tax collectors and the prostitutes believed Yochanan. In other words, they repented from their wicked lifestyle and took off in a different direction in their lives. Humble, fearful, repentant. But the leaders of Israel did not. This is Messiah Yeshua's endorsement, public endorsement as the king who'd ridden the donkey into Jerusalem. This is Messiah Yeshua's endorsement of Yochanan's water washing for Israel that Paul said was for all the people of Israel. In other words, in my D line here, Yochanan's washing baptisma, publicly endorsed by Messiah Yeshua, thus was practiced by all Nazarene Jews, the Jews that followed Yeshua, who repented and trusted the risen Messiah Yeshua. And this is the source of Peter's command in Messiah Yeshua's name in Acts chapter 2 to all the house of Israel in Jerusalem on the Jewish festival of Shavuot. This is the source. Here's the deal, folks. You can't start reading Acts on its own and then look around in Matthew for a source for what Peter was doing. Scholars today across the spectrum of all the denominations and levels of, let's say, conservative commitment to the Bible, the vast majority believe that Luke, Acts, both of those books were written by the single author. Traditionally, it's Luke. Luke, the author, wrote Luke, Acts. And so to understand what's going on in Acts, you've got to read Luke. And there's no command in the book of Luke by Yeshua for a new water baptism for the Christian church. He did ask, was John's baptism from heaven or from men? So he repeated the idea that Yochanan's baptism was definitely from heaven. It was ordained by the Almighty for the people of Israel. And when Peter preached on the day of Shavuot, Pentecost, Yochanan had been killed, a couple of years earlier? Yeshua had ascended into heaven. Peter was on his own. He was on his own, and it's a tradition among the Jewish people to tell where your source of authority is, and that's what he did. He preached a water ritual in Messiah Yeshua's name because Yeshua had just endorsed it. That's 50 days earlier. Just a little over 2 months earlier. 2 months earlier, Yeshua had endorsed John's baptism in Jerusalem as King of Israel. What is Peter going to do on the day of Shavuot? So that's what it is, folks. Believe it, don't believe it, reject it. This is what you've got to face. You've got to face the almost certainty that on the day of Shavuot, Peter was proclaiming Yochanan's water baptism for the people of Israel because Messiah Yeshua had endorsed it just before Passover about 2 months earlier. Now we're going to go to our fourth and final section of this overview of my view of what's going on in the Bible as far as water baptism goes. There's a semantic parallel that's found 6 times in the 4 Gospels and Acts. And that semantic parallel is that Yochanan baptized with water, but the coming one, Yeshua, would baptize with the Holy Spirit. That phrase is found 6 times in the 4 Gospels and Acts. It's found 3 times in Luke Acts. So in other words, it's found once in Matthew, once in Mark, once in John. It's found once in Luke, and it's found twice in Acts. John baptized with water, but you'll be baptized with the Holy Spirit. Now, doesn't that strike anybody that wants to pay attention? Doesn't that strike anybody that this must be important? If it's found 6 times in all 4 Gospels and twice in Acts, John baptized with water, but you'll be baptized with the Holy Spirit. And this is a problem because it's popular today to believe that the word baptizo and its cognates signify some sort of immersion. And unfortunately, that just is not true. It could signify an immersion of some sort, but it doesn't have to signify immersion. Especially in the New Testament. Generally speaking, in the New Testament, it basically means some sort of action that causes purification in a Jewish sense. That's what it's often used for in the New Testament. So my A line here, in the New Testament, baptizo and cognates mean more than only immerse. They often convey the idea of purifying in the New Testament. B line, thus there is a divinely promised great spiritual purification of Israel and all nations that first occurred on Shavuot, Pentecost, and from then on among all the followers of Messiah Yeshua, whether Jews or Greeks. C line here, palpable reception of the end-time gift of the Holy Spirit was expected for all believers in Messiah Yeshua, and thus is still promised to this day. When the onlookers heard and watched the 120 as they were expressing praises to the Almighty by the power of the Holy Spirit, they heard them and watched them. People could see, people could observe it. Peter he cited the prophecy in Joel, of course, with a lead in, I believe, from Isaiah chapter 2. It shall be in the last days, plural. If you read Isaiah chapter 2, it's talking about end times. And in my humble understanding, this is, Peter may very well have quoted that early chapter of Isaiah as a prelude to the prophecy in Joel, because they're both prophecies of the end times. Unfortunately, we still haven't seen the fullness of Isaiah chapter 2, but there it is right there, the first line of it. It shall be in the last days. When you look at it in Greek, there's only one word different, and that's the initial word. But the rest of it comes directly from the Septuagint, or at least it is the same wording as found in the Septuagint for Isaiah chapter 2. And it's plural. In the last days, I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. And your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your old men will dream dreams. Even on my servants and handmaidens, I will pour out my spirit, and they shall prophesy. In the last days, plural again, twice. In that passage, we read plural days. So it's not a one-time shot, and from then on, nobody knows when they receive the Holy Spirit, but everybody gets it. Which is just stretching it all way, way, way out of whack, in my opinion. So, palpable reception of the end-time gift of the Holy Spirit was expected for all believers in Messiah Yeshua by those first Jewish disciples who'd had a powerful, palpable experience of receiving this end-time promise. Why wouldn't they expect it for everybody else when it says in the last days? That's what they were looking for. They were definitely not cessationists. So my D line here, my last line for this, is what I conclude is that this great purification with the Holy Spirit is the one baptism for the body of Messiah that Paul wrote about in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 5. So these are the points that I take issue with among all the different denominations of Christian civilization.